Hello, everybody. Welcome into the Trade Block. I am Ryan Wormeli, joined by Pat Fitzmaurice, as I am on the first Tuesday of every month all year long. We are talking Dynasty, all things Dynasty. We're running through our most recent update to the Dynasty Trade Value Chart. That can be found at FantasyPros.com, of course. We'll be taking some questions from the audience. We'll be talking to some folks in the audience as well. Gonna be a fun show as always. We are also on video now for at least the first half of this show. So if you are listening to us on the audio version, please check out the Fantasy Pros YouTube channel. You can find our chat about the Dynasty Trade Value Chart, which will be the first half of the show, on YouTube moving forward. Fitz, how you doing?
Doing well, Worm. Thanks. Looking forward to it. I kind of like this time of year. You know, I mean, it's sad that we're about to get our last NFL game of the season, but at the same time, there really is no off season. We're hitting rookie time of year. Just wrapped up the Shrine Bowl and the Senior Bowl. About to go into the Combine. Free agency is coming up soon, so really there's no off season. And I always enjoy the maneuvering, roster maneuvering in the off season.
Are you in the camp that enjoys the Dynasty off season more than you enjoy the week to week setting lineups in season in a Dynasty league?
I do, and especially with our job, sometimes it's hard to put a lot of time into trades. And I can spend more time on that with my Dynasty teams this time of year. So I appreciate the extra breathing room, I guess.
I almost would prefer like a Dynasty best ball format, which I know does exist, but just like I enjoy everything about it except for like the setting. I mean, I enjoy setting lineups, obviously, right? But like it's more fun to do everything else. So that would almost be more appealing to me. We're going to go through, as we always do, the Dynasty Trade Value Chart, like I mentioned at the top. We have a February update. We update that on the site the first of every month all year long. So we've got our February one here. We'll start as we usually do with quarterbacks. And interestingly enough, we have a new quarterback at the very top. He's actually tied at the top, but it's Jaden Daniels, who we obviously had very high prior to this update, right? He was, I believe, third going into this. He's now tied for first in our Superflex value, which is denoted at 127. And it's him, Lamar, and Josh Allen are all at that. To give you a sense of where that ranks, fourth on the list is Joe Burrow. He's down at 112. Then Mahomes at 102. Hurts 99, and so on and so forth down. So at the top, it's now a three-way tie, Fitz.
Yeah, Daniels is my QB1 in Dynasty, Worm. And Bogman and I were discussing this on one of the Dynasty shows we just recorded. And he's got Lamar and Josh Allen ahead of Daniels. And I get it. Those guys have a lengthier track record. But to me, I looked at their production the last 3 years, and Lamar has averaged somewhere between 20 and 25 fantasy points per game over the last 3 seasons. Josh Allen has been between like 22 and 24 the last 3 seasons. And Jaden Daniels, if you strip out week 18 where he played just part of the game, he was basically at 22 and a half fantasy points per game in his rookie year. And he is like 4 years younger than those other guys. Lamar and Josh Allen are 28. Jaden Daniels is 24. So I don't think this is a mirage, what he did in his rookie season. Like, this guy not only has exquisite difference-making running ability, like, he is a really good passer. Like, he's a more advanced passer than Lamar was coming into the league. Maybe not quite the runner Lamar was, but close. So, yeah, I mean, to me, like, I think the way we have it with Jaden Daniels, Lamar Jackson, and Josh Allen all having identical 1 QB and Superflex value, I think that's very fair. And I think if you polled a lot of different Dynasty managers, you'd get a lot of different answers about how to rank those 3. How would you rank those 3, Worm?
I was just going to say, I would definitely have Allen first. It's just been too consistently elite for him without the same level of theoretical injury concerns, and not always theoretical, sometimes very real and valid injury concerns on the Lamar side. To me, like, if I have the first pick in a Superflex startup, like, I'm not even considering anybody besides Allen. I do think Lamar versus Jaden is an interesting conversation. I guess to me it comes down to you're either weighing what value you're getting what, like 6 years from now, like when these guys start to decline because of age and Jaden Daniels is still in his prime, versus the certainty of we've seen them do it multiple times, as opposed to Jaden Daniels, who has only done it once, it was awesome. Like I the reason I'm kind of like couching the way I'm phrasing is because I don't want to come across like I'm diminishing what Jaden Daniels did. Like clearly he's incredible and is a very worthy top 3 pick in this kind of format. I just think personally there's enough years left with Lamar and Allen that I'd rather have the certainty of we've seen them be elite, historic fantasy scoring seasons multiple times, as opposed to Jaden who's only done it once. But that to me is more like personal preference. That's like my style of building a team,
Sure.
more so than it is saying I think Lamar and Allen must be ahead of Jaden, if that distinction makes sense.
Yeah, that is fair. And, like it's possible Jaden takes a step back like CJ Stroud did in year 2, but I don't think there's anything fluky about his rookie season, and I will gladly take the guy 4 years younger over those other guys. But it is really like a razor-thin margin.
Well, and even with Stroud taking that step back, we still have him 7th on this list.
Yep.
He's at his value's 93, which is tied for 7th highest of any quarterback. So, or of any player really. So that shows you that even if Jaden Daniels takes a step back this year, he would still likely be like there's a floor here, barring some kind of catastrophic injury, knock on wood, that like he's not going to drop too far, even if he falls down from this top 3 spot he's at. We've talked a lot in our previous renditions of this show, Fitz, about a lot of the guys at the top. I want to ask you about some new names on this list. For the first time, we have some of these incoming rookie guys on here. Cam Ward is 24th highest amongst quarterbacks. Shedeur Sanders is 26th. And then we actually have 2 more inside the top 32, which I am surprised by. I get it because at the bottom of the top 32, there's some names that you're probably not all that interested in. The Kirk Cousinses of the world, the Aaron Rodgerses of the world are below these guys. But I was not expecting going in, given what we have talked about this class in the past, to see Jalen Milroe at QB 31 and Jaxson Dart at QB 32. Not that those are necessarily aggressive rankings. They're still pretty much as bottom as you can get as a starting quarterback. But the fact that they're inside the top 32, I didn't really expect.
That's exactly where I have these 2 guys at 31 and 32. And I actually have Cam Ward and Shedeur a little higher in my rankings than we do in the trade value charts. I've got, I have actually Shedeur 1 spot ahead of Ward, and I have them both just ahead of Bryce Young, Baker Mayfield, and Jared Goff. And I know that's a little aggressive for some. With these 2 guys, considering this is not considered a great year for quarterbacks, but given that these guys are young, that they are probably both going to have top 5 draft capital. I don't know. I don't really care about the people who say that Shedeur Sanders isn't a first round, doesn't have a first round grade on their board, but like I would be shocked if both of those guys or either of those guys slide outside the top 5 in the draft. And there's some blemishes in both of their games. Shedeur might not add a ton of running value. Like he's mobile within the pocket, but he actually just chooses to keep his eyes downfield and try to find receivers rather than run. And maybe that changes a little bit once he gets to the pro game. Doesn't have like a huge arm, but man, he is really accurate. And I think that's something people are underselling a little bit. That's why I like him a little more than Ward. My fear with Ward is just like, this dude holds onto the ball forever. I'm just worried like he is going to, take David Carr type sack numbers in his rookie season because, man, he just does not want to get rid of it sometimes unless he sees his receivers come open.
So Shedeur is technically tied in our trade value chart with Sam Darnold, so they're kind of tied for 25th. Ward is technically tied with 5 names. He's 1 of 5. So you could theoretically rank him as high as 20th. It's J.J. McCarthy, Dak Prescott, Tua Tagovailoa, Bryce Young, and Cam Ward are all valued the same in our chart. You kind of already answered the question about who you prefer, but what's your thought process behind picking between, I want to highlight Bryce Young specifically versus either of these 2 quarterbacks? What are you thinking about when deciding who you want to rank higher between those 3? And really just pick either Ward or Shedeur versus Bryce.
Yeah, I think with Bryce, given that he failed so spectacularly the first time and, like redeemed himself a little bit late in 2024. So it's hard to suggest after 2 years that Bryce Young has superstar upside. I think maybe the upside is like slightly better than league average starting quarterback, which is why I've got to slide Shedeur and Cam Ward ahead of him. And then I've got him ahead of guys like, Goff and Tua, because those guys are older. Tua obviously has the concussion concerns. McCarthy coming off a major injury. Like, to me, Cam and Shedeur are like basically on the same level as McCarthy as quarterback prospects, and those guys haven't had a major injury, and McCarthy has. So that's why I would prefer those two.
Give me some quick thoughts on Jaxson Dart, just because we have talked a bit about Ward and Shedeur on other shows. Even Milrow, we've hit on a bit. I know Bogman likes Milrow, I think maybe better than you do. But Jaxson Dart is not a name we've touched on too often as we've dived into this class. So just from your early perspective as we sit here at the beginning of February, is he somebody that you're intrigued by? If he gets decent draft capital, will you be considering him maybe higher than you expected in rookie drafts, or is this kind of a placeholder, like he's an okay prospect and somebody has to be 32nd?
Yeah, he's polar. Like, some people, I've seen some people in the fantasy community, dynasty people, say like he might be in the running to be their quarterback one in this class, and other people who just kind of don't see it. So Jaxson Dart he's a pretty aggressive runner. Like, I wouldn't say he's super elusive. He's sort of like a smaller Josh Allen type runner, just sort of will take off aggressively, but just kind of more, it's more about his fearlessness than his elusiveness. His accuracy on the short and intermediate stuff is okay. He's got some extraordinary deep ball accuracy. Like, when you watch his highlights, he just drops deep throws right in the bucket, and it's really impressive. I guess my biggest issue with Jaxson Dart is that, it's one thing to throw 6 touchdown passes against Furman or Vanderbilt than it is to do it against Georgia, Alabama, some of the elite opponents, and it seemed like Jaxson Dart consistently underperformed against the best defenses that Ole Miss faced.
By now, most of you have probably heard of Reality Sports Online, the powerful fantasy sports platform where owners get to build and manage their fantasy team like an NFL general manager. But the question is, have you tried it? It's time to go see what all the buzz in the Dynasty community is about. Free agency, multi-year contracts, a rookie draft, multi-team trades, franchise tags, contract extensions, first-round rookie options, automated contract and salary cap functionality, and much, much more. Think it sounds complicated? It's not. The best thing about Reality Sports Online Fantasy Front Office is that it doesn't take any more time than a standard league. It just requires more strategy. Think you're among the fantasy elite? Well, this is the platform to test your mettle. Still not sure? You can test out your general manager skills for free in a mock free agency auction. If you like what you see, use promo code FantasyPros to receive a 10% discount on your team or league today. That's promo code FantasyPros to receive a 10% discount on your team or league today. Fantasy just got real at realitysportsonline.com. All right, let's look at the running backs here. We've talked plenty about Ashley Genty. Everybody knows he's the 101 in rookie drafts. He's a top 3, the way we have it ranked, dynasty running back the day he gets drafted. I want to look down at a different rookie, Omarion Hampton, who I know you like. He's ranked as RB14 in our dynasty rankings. It is higher than I anticipated. I'm not surprised because of the weight I know you put on him and just the value you see in him as a prospect. But 14, when you hear that number, does that sound high to you, or do you say, no, that's right, he's really, really good?
I've got him 15. So, and like, I have him right behind Derrick Henry. And I guess depending on
who by the way, is 15th in the trade value chart. So you flip them, and it's the way you have it.
Yeah, and generally I tend to maybe play more of a youth-centric game than some other dynasty managers do. So it's kind of weird that I would have Hampton below Derrick Henry maybe, but I really like him. Like, he is just, man, he is like, his lateral agility for a big guy is really impressive. He is just a downhill dude who is really hard to tackle, and he catches a lot of passes. Like, yes, please, a guy who like runs and moves extraordinarily well for a guy that big and catches passes. Like, I think it's going to be a really smooth NFL transition for Omarion Hampton.
Where do you want to see him go that you think is realistic?
Oh man, I've been thinking, Worm, that the Chargers are really the dream spot for one of the top running backs. Just put him with J.K. Dobbins being a free agent. This is assuming they don't re-sign J.K. Dobbins. But, man, get one of these top backs on the Chargers who, they're going to want to run the ball with Greg Roman and Jim Harbaugh. And just like a really good team working in concert with a very good quarterback entering the prime of his career. Like, I think that would be a terrific landing spot.
So let me ask you this. Let's say Omarion Hampton goes to the Chargers. Omarion Hampton or, I'm going to throw a bunch of different names at you here just one at a time. Omarion Hampton or Derrick Henry.
Then I'd take Hampton.
Omarion Hampton or Kyron Williams.
I think probably I would slide Hampton ahead of Williams.
Omarion Hampton or Kenneth Walker.
Hampton.
Omarion Hampton or Josh Jacobs.
I think I still have to go Hampton.
Omarion Hampton or James Cook.
All right, that might be my tipping point. I think I'm still keeping James Cook at that point.
And then the guys ahead of Cook, at least the way we have it on the chart, Chase Brown, Bucky Irving, and then you get into kind of that pretty clear top seven.
Yeah,
Jonathan Taylor, H-Chain, all those guys. So right around like 10 or 11, it sounds like, for you.
Yep, I would bump Hampton from my RB15 in Dynasty to my RB11 in Dynasty.
Sticking with the theme of the rookies, back to back in the early 20s, we have Travion Henderson, RB21, Caleb Johnson, RB22, Quinshon Judkins, RB23. They're kind of sandwiched by names like CMC, Alvin Kamara ahead of them, and then behind them are Tyrone Tracy, Tony Pollard, Brian Robinson. I think that's about the right spot for them, especially as a placeholder before we know their landing spots. To what degree will landing spots impact how you rank those three? Like, are they about even for you, and it will be almost entirely dependent on landing spot for who kind of manipulates themselves ahead of each other? Or is it like you actually do think one of these guys is better than the others?
No, that's kind of it for me. Like right now, my order of preference is Travion Henderson, Quinshon Judkins, Caleb Johnson. But there's not the margin behind those between those three guys is very thin. I have those three jammed in just behind Tyrone Tracy and Christian McCaffrey, and just ahead of David Montgomery and Tony Pollard.
The next rookie on the list is Dylan Sampson. Is that the right rookie to be the next highest valued, but after those top four?
I think so. I think things could change based on how players test at the scouting combine, Worm, although I would expect Dylan Sampson to test really well. Just like really explosive, intriguing player. The only thing I worry about is that players from Tennessee are kind of tough evaluations sometimes because the offense that Josh Heupel runs is just so, I mean, it's gimmicky, but in a good way. Like, I think Heupel is probably the best offensive mind in college football, but sometimes the translation from Tennessee to the NFL is, I don't know, kind of hard to get a handle on. Like, it's worked great for some guys, and then, I know a lot of people who loved Jalen Wright last year, and I don't know. I wasn't exactly bowled over by Jalen Wright in his rookie season with the Dolphins.
Yeah. Neither were defenders. Looking at some of the wide receivers now, we don't have to spend too much time at the top because, again, everybody loves these guys. They're the backbone of any strong dynasty roster. We all love them. I thought it was notable that Puka's value appears to have dropped a bit. I don't totally get that because I know we have the trade, Cooper Kupp announcing that he has been told that the Rams are looking to trade him. It would seem to me that would help Puka's value. This obviously was put together a couple of days ago, so that wasn't necessarily taken into consideration. But either way, I was surprised to see Puka go down. Not a lot. He's still our fourth most highly valued receiver here. But was there thought on your end going into why he dropped?
Yeah, I mean, put it this way, Worm. Do you think CeeDee Lamb and Puka are neck and neck? Or do you think Lamb is, like a notch, a solid notch above?
I would have Lamb, not a significant notch, but a small notch above. There is a separation there in my mind.
Yep, and that's the way I feel now. That's kind of reflected in our rankings, and I think maybe the last time around we had Puka ahead of Lamb, and this the trade value chart takes different people's rankings into account, and maybe some of the analysts were a little swayed by circumstances at the time. Like Puka was kind of balling out, and Lamb was struggling for a while with no Dak Prescott. So maybe that was reflected a little more in our dynasty values for some people than it should have been.
If you had to pick one name, and it can be literally anybody who's not currently in that top three of Chase, Jefferson, Lamb. Pick one name who a year from now is valued at the same price that those guys are, and we have just as much confidence, and they are now in that tier. They are trade value is around 90, which is what Chase and Jefferson are both at right now. It can be literally anybody besides those three. What name are you betting on?
Brian Thomas Jr. And it's just I think he and Neighbors are roughly as good as each other, but I think it's going to take the Giants a while to figure out the quarterback situation, and I do think the combination of Liam Cohen and Brian Thomas Jr. are going to elevate Trevor Lawrence next year, and certainly Brian Thomas Jr. has more potential with Trevor Lawrence than he did with Mac Jones. And he was still balling out with Mac Jones as his quarterback late in the year. So I am someone who grossly underranked Brian Thomas Jr. in my rookie rankings. So big mea culpa here. He's fantastic, and I would not be surprised if we considered him to be on the Chase Jefferson level a year from now.
We pre-recorded an episode that hasn't been released yet, but we talked with Jake Seeley about some free agency predictions earlier today. Tee Higgins was a part of that conversation. We talked about him maybe going to Jacksonville. Is there a spot where he would land that, for dynasty ranking purposes, you would be most excited to bump him up? He's currently our 14th highest valued receiver, or a spot on the other side where you would be most inclined to bump him down from there, if there is such a spot that exists.
Yeah, I mean, if Jake's prediction comes true and he goes to Jacksonville, I'll be bumping him down, and I'd kind of hate that landing spot because it would devalue both Higgins and Brian Thomas Jr. I mean, my prediction for Tee Higgins would be New England. They have the most money. They have one of the thinnest groups of wide receivers in the league, if not the thinnest. And I have immense confidence in Drake May, who I know Drake May's value on our dynasty chart. We have him as the 10th highest ranked quarterback. I have him 6th. I think Drake May is the absolute real deal, and I would love to see him get Tee Higgins.
Pretty wide gap between Tet McMillan, who's wide receiver 16 on this chart, and the next rookie receiver, Luther Burden's wide receiver 32, and then Emeka Egbuka is right behind Burden at wide receiver 33. Is that kind of the way you see it in terms of doing rookie drafts, that there is a sizable gap between McMillan and then everybody else?
I guess it's fair in that I think Tet's floor is pretty safe. Maybe he's not a superstar, but I do think he's pretty foolproof. And that's the one thing about Burden. I think Emeka Egbuka might be pretty foolproof too, but I don't know what his ceiling is going to be. I think Tet has the best combination of floor and ceiling. Burden probably has the widest range of outcome of those top three. Could be a star, could potentially be a bust. I mean, his numbers this last year at Missouri, he wasn't Missouri's leading receiver. And they had injury issues for their quarterback, Brady Cook, but those injury issues would affect the other wide receivers too. And Theo Weiss, a guy who's probably going to be a day 3 pick, if he's picked at all, outperformed Luther Burden. So, and Egbuka, very good slot receiver, might have Jackson Smith and Jigba type potential at the upper end of things, but maybe not quite. So, yeah, I mean, I think their outlooks are pretty well reflected with our values in the dynasty trade value chart.
Is there anybody, last question on the receivers, that stands out to you when seeing what these values are as a clear buy low or a clear sell high? Because they're really like anybody from like the late teens into the mid 30s, like we could do an entire 3-hour episode on just the receivers alone in terms of dynasty value. It's a really, obviously, like I said before, it's the backbone of your roster. It's a really interesting position, and it's a position where you can see values change, quickly. So is there anybody that stands out to you? Like, Chris Olave, a year ago, he was much higher. He's now down at wide receiver 31. If you believe into the health and then what he can be under likely Kellen Moore in New Orleans, is there somebody that you think is a sell high? Terry McLaurin is sneaky older than you expected. Is there any name that stands out to you on the list at all that you think goes one way or the other?
I loved what I saw from Ricky Pearsall late in the season, Worm, and I do think that the 49ers are going to want to move one of their veterans, whether it's Debo or Ayuk. Ayuk might be harder to move because of his contract, but I think they're going to make way for him. For Pearsall, and right now we've got him valued roughly the same as Cortland Sutton, who's very good but older, and Jalen McMillan, who put up some really nice numbers. I would rather have Pearsall than McMillan, and I think Pearsall's value on our chart, he's a guy I'm going to be trying to acquire in some leagues this offseason.
How about Cedric Tillman at wide receiver 60? I know Jerry Jeudy had the great finish. Tillman dealing with some injury stuff and the concussion. But he had a few game stretch there where not only was he really productive, but he was doing it in a very dominant way based on the eye test. If Cleveland gets quarterback solved, who the heck knows what that's going to look like? Maybe it's one of these, Shedeur, Cam Ward draft picks. I suppose there aren't really many other options besides that. But if it's not Deshaun Watson, who's their starting quarterback next season, and it's looking that way, where will you have Tillman ranked in Dynasty? Because I think wide receiver 60, which is where he's at on this chart, is a bit too low.
Yeah, safe to say, I think with the newly retorn Achilles, that it's not going to be Deshaun Watson next year. But who it's going to be, that's a good question. I'm trying to see. Yeah, so I'm 10 spots higher on Tillman. I've got him at wide receiver 50. And granted, I think there's going to be some pretty wide variance between how dynasty managers value him. It's just so hard to get a handle on him when he was a product of the Jameis effect. Well, I don't want to say that. I guess the better way to phrase that, Worm, is to what extent was Cedric Tillman?
Well, I was going to say, because Jeudy was that too, and he's wide receiver 26, so it's not hampering his value.
Yeah, but Jeudy also balled out with Bailey Zappi and some other guys down the stretch.
Yeah, that's true.
He kind of kept it going after Winston was pulled, and Tillman at the time was hurt, so we really couldn't tell. But yeah, I do think Tillman might be a buy, and I feel pretty good about having him on a couple of my dynasty rosters. So yeah, I just don't know if I want to be grossly overweight on Cedric Tillman if I'm that confident, but I am pretty optimistic.
And looking at the tight ends, the first thing that stands out to me is in the top 20, there are 6 incoming rookies. So the position, which has, kind of long been a frustrating one for managers, either you have one of the elite guys or you're kind of throwing your hands up and throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks. Maybe getting kind of an influx of talent here. There's a bit of a drop-off, actually pretty sizable drop-off from the top 18 to 19 and 20, who are a couple of rookies. So maybe it's a little bit misleading to say that 6 in the top 20, but that top 18, there's some separation, and there are 4 new names in there. Guys like Tyler Warren is at tight end 5 in our value. Colston Loveland, tight end 7. Harold Fannin Jr., tight end 10. We've talked a bit about those guys on the Dynasty show with Bogman in terms of how they rank, not amongst rookies, but amongst the other folks at their position in Dynasty. Do any of those rankings stand out to you as too high or too low, or are they all about right?
We might need to readjust Fannin. I think he was considered a little disappointing at the Senior Bowl this past week, based on what I've read. I'll have to talk to our colleague Derek Brown about him, because Debro was down in Mobile for the Senior Bowl, and our colleague Mike Mayer. I with some of the stuff I have read so far, apparently Fannin was not all that impressive. But when you look at his numbers last year, I know it was at Bowling Green, so it was against some lesser competition, but I think it was, 117 catches and 1,500 yards, just numbers that pop off the page. The only thing about Fannin is he's like 230 pounds, so he might not be an every down player, just kind of a move tight end. And you might have to dock him, because a 230-pound tight end is probably not playing more than about 70% of the offensive snaps. Whereas Tyler Warren and Colston Loveland are big dudes, and they're probably going to be 3-down players. So I like those two. And the other three, we should just mention the names for them to get our listeners familiar with them if they're not deep into the weeds with rookie prospects yet. Gunnar Helm of Texas, Oronde Gadsden II. Some people might remember his dad, a former Miami Dolphins receiver, or his son Oronde Gadsden II played at Syracuse. And then, I'm blanking on where Mason Taylor played. I should know this, Worm. Hold on one second.
I have an answer, and I'm going to be like, I'm going to sound like it. Okay, yeah, LSU is what I was going to say.
LSU, yeah.
And then I was like, wait, if I say it wrong, then I'm going to sound like an idiot. But no, it was LSU.
Yeah, Mason Taylor, who is the son of former Miami Dolphins edge rusher Jaxson Taylor. So, and apparently he was pretty impressive down at the Senior Bowl also. So, really exciting tight end class. I mean, geez, we follow up Brock Bowers with like another wave of tight end talent. I mean, we might have to stop complaining about the tight end position after a while, Worm.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good, Brock Bowers at the top, Trey McBride, awesome. Sam Laporta, awesome. Like, these guys coming in. I mean, Colston Loveland, I like, but I might not have him as high as 7. Like, I think I'd rather have Tucker Kraft, and they're valued very, very closely to each other. It's not like we have a wide gap there. It's literally a gap of 1 on our trade value chart. But I think I'd rather have Kraft than Loveland, at least as of now, before knowing a landing spot. Tyler Warren, though, the whole class is good. He stands out to me. He's the one, and obviously he's ranked highest amongst the rookies for us, but he's the one where a year from now, he's not going to be on the Bowers McBride level, I don't think, but he's the only one of these guys where my jaw wouldn't be on the floor if he was.
Yeah, there's a lot of George Kittle to his game where he just physically dominates, put the ball in his hands and good luck trying to tackle him. Yeah, I mean, he's just, and they will, Penn State would give him the ball on running plays a lot. I don't know how many times he carried this year. I'm going to guess it was 30 plus. Yeah, really just very intriguing. Loveland, the only thing, if you look at Loveland's college stats, you'll be like, what's so special about him? Just keep in mind that Michigan ran the ball like crazy 2 years ago in their national championship season. And then this past year, they had just a gruesome quarterback situation. So Loveland really never got to strut his stuff like Tyler Warren and Harold Fannin did in college.
Just quickly, because I don't want to only talk about the rookies, Mark Andrews is at 9. Isaiah Likely is at 24. If Mark Andrews wasn't on the Ravens, and they're not going to cut him just because of that drop in the divisional round game, but that ending to the game was sort of an encapsulation of the folks who say Likely is just the more talented receiving tight end. It's a pretty wide gap in terms of our dynasty value. If Andrews wasn't there, Likely to me would be tight end 6. He would be super, super high on this list. Another year older for Andrews, obviously coming off this horrific game for him in the playoffs. Do you think maybe I'm not saying that you should drop Andrews, but that Likely might be a buy low where he's ranked?
Yes, sir. And blame the other analysts for these rankings, Worm. I have Andrews 10th and likely 16th, so I see it the same way you do.
Yeah, I'm like looking at some of these names in the teens. Like, I would rather have likely than Evan Ingram. I'd rather have likely than Jake Ferguson. I'd rather have likely than any rookie besides Warren and maybe, Loveland. I want to see where he goes. I really do like the prospect. But like, Jonnu Smith, late career breakout, like Travis Kelce might retire this year. Like I know he's talking like he won't, but I just, there's a lot of names I would rather have likely than just that upside. And he's still young and he just is really, really good when he gets the opportunity.
Yeah,
so
I have likely ahead of all the guys you just mentioned, except Jake Ferguson, because I'm a Wisconsin homer.
Yeah, I was going to say, well, I get to be a homer with the Ravens, so you can be a homer. Where's that Chigakonkwo? He needs to be higher too, because he a Terp. All right, and by the way, speaking of homerism, you'll notice I did not mention Maryland beating Wisconsin basketball just a couple of days ago.
It was bad enough I was in Las Vegas and lost money on Wisconsin, so thank you for not mentioning that.
Very, very classy by me. I want to remind everybody that you can evaluate trades with confidence using Fantasy Pros Trade Analyzer. Instantly see the impact of trades on your team and get expert recommendations, whether you're making a 2-for-1 deal or swapping a couple draft picks for that stud who will help you win now. The Trade Analyzer will help you optimize your roster and make smarter decisions. Try the Trade Analyzer today at fantasypros.com/myplaybook and dominate your league. To hear our Discord Q&A and dive deeper into trades, check out the full podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Also, join our Discord at fantasypros.com/chat and tune into the Trade Block live at 5 p.m. Eastern, the first Tuesday of every month. Join the fun, get your questions answered, and be on the show.